Crazy. BlackRock is selling Bitcoin like there's no tomorrow. Attention, folks, we've got the biggest Bitcoin ETF outflow at BlackRock since the launch of Bitcoin ETFs. And yesterday, we already had the second largest outflow. Now we have another record outflow today. And right at this moment, the news is coming in that BlackRock has sent over 5,000 Bitcoins to Coinbase, which could be a new record sale. So we have absolute panic selling in the market. Fortunately, the Bitcoin price has stabilized somewhat again. We have recovered a bit here, but we're still in a very, very precarious situation, and we need to keep an eye on what's going on here. In addition, we are now seeing statements from the new crypto star here in the USA, David Sacks, who is talking about corruption in the USA and is making a new burner statement about the Fort Knox scandal that will also knock your socks off, which we are also looking at because he is also speaking out now. More and more people are speaking out publicly here about Fort Knox. And then we have an exciting hearing from Cynthia Lummis. The first hearing of the Senate Banking Subcommittee on legislation regarding digital assets took place yesterday. And Cynthia Lummis is talking about bipartisan Bitcoin legislation, so about a cross-party Bitcoin law. But it's also about stablecoins. We also look at what happened there, as this event is touted as the biggest Bitcoin event in Q. And we'll see if it really was such a big event. First, let's take a look at what's going on with BlackRock. I made a video yesterday about emergency sales happening at BlackRock. As it stands now, this line continues forever. And yes, please write to me again in the comments, it's not BlackRock that's selling, but the customers. Of course, it is clear that they are selling the customers, not BlackRock, because a lot of people write like that. Don't always say that BlackRock is selling, but that the customers are selling. When I say BlackRock is selling, I always mean that the customers are selling. It should be clear that BlackRock is just the holder of the Bitcoins and doesn't actually own the Bitcoins themselves. They manage the Bitcoins for the customers. Here, it definitely means that BlackRock sold Bitcoin worth $423 million yesterday, the biggest outflow since the ETF launch. And that's crazy because every time BlackRock sells such massive Bitcoin holdings, there's always unrest in the market and people always get upset, although I don't really understand it because the sales aren't that big. I mean, 5,000 Bitcoin, yes, is a decent amount, but for BlackRock, if they buy some Bitcoin in one day, it's not that much, but the signal is just not good here. But other ETFs, like Fidelity with 1,700 Bitcoin and so on, also experienced some really, really big outflows. And now something else interesting has actually happened. At this moment, we can see that there are further outflows happening at Coinbase from BlackRock, it seems. Someone also writes here, what's the point of that? BlackRock is transferring 5,100 Bitcoin worth $441 million to Coinbase, and they're now ready for sale. Here you can see the transaction history, and I'm not 100% sure if the message here is actually correct or if it's just a replica of the last message and they're wrong here. But as you can see, several people have really picked this up, like Cointelegraph, Ash Crypto, some random shitcoin or something, I don't know. In any case, there are now several reports that in the last 30 minutes, Coinbase has received more Bitcoin from BlackRock. And that would mean we're looking at another record sale on top of the record sale. So tomorrow we might get the news that, okay, BlackRock not only sold the 5,000 Bitcoin yesterday, but it's also a bit delayed. That means when the Bitcoins are sold, it's almost always shifted for the whole day, not completely, maybe around 12 hours or so. And if they're sending Bitcoin to Coinbase now, then tomorrow we'll get the news saying, okay, officially confirmed, BlackRock has sent another 5,200 Bitcoin. I think that was the number, or was it 5,200? And we've never seen anything like this in the history of Bitcoin ETFs, with 3 outflows in a row and record highs one after another. It's really crazy what's going on. But on the other hand, the market is currently experiencing some downturns. It almost looks as if the worst of the panic is already out there. But who knows, if some shocking news comes out, the fire could reignite at any time and you could make another downward move. The pullbacks are absolute opportunities to buy more. We're seeing whales buying like crazy on weekends, selling off their lettuce, just dumping Bitcoin and feeling good about getting out before Bitcoin crashes into the ground. But Bitcoin isn't going to crash into the ground because we have such a strong foundation of long-term holders, people who are fundamentally convinced about Bitcoin. So you don't need to worry now that Bitcoin will crash against the US dollar. Sure, there's still a bit of downward play or something like that, but there won't be a Bitcoin death or anything like that. Bitcoin isn't done for just because it's correcting down against the US dollar or something. So no need to panic here. And we also had the hearing here in the banking committee where the topic was digital assets and Bitcoin, and now bipartisan legislation is to be enacted. And they would also be talking about Bitcoin with bullish statements being made by Cynthia Lummis. But it was also a bit disappointing, to be honest. We're going to take a look at what happened there in just a moment. Before we check that out, Let's take a quick look at David Sacks, who just gave a new interview where he talks about corruption in the US and shares some fresh insights about Fort Knox, which you don't really hear about that often these days, so definitely check it out. Oh, and just to be clear, David Sacks is the crypto Caesar in charge of all the crypto and digital asset development here in the U.S.
Ach so, und das sollte klar sein, David Sacks ist hier der Krypto-Caesar, also hier zuständig für die ganze Krypto-Digital-Asset-Entwicklung hier in der USA.
What I think is interesting about this is that nobody has said this is a crazy idea to go make sure the gold is actually there. And, just think about that. I mean, I think the gold is probably there. I think the gold is almost certainly there, but nobody thinks it's a crazy idea to go check because we don't know. That's how bad the corruption has gotten in Washington, is that we can't fully trust that our gold is still in Fort Knox. I think the majority of the American people are distrustful, and we've seen that the corruption in Washington is rampant. That is what Doge has exposed. USAID, this was this slush fund for all these left-wing and Democratic interest groups. They were funding the media, the New York Times, Politico, the BBC. 9 out of 10 publications in Ukraine were getting funded, and so on down the line it went. So we've seen, as Doge has uncovered, more and more about where our money is actually being spent. We've seen this enormous expose of corruption, and I think that people are actually so skeptical now of how our government is taking care of our money that I think they actually are a little bit worried about whether the gold is still in Fort Knox. Now, like I said, I think it probably is there, but we got to check.
So this is a slightly different voice here. Most voices are saying, yeah, the gold is definitely not in Fort Knox. David Sacks says that right now in the US, it looks like the level of corruption is so high that everyone just assumes there's no gold there. Just like in Germany, everyone assumes that the ECB is up to a bunch of shady stuff and that the ECB is a corrupt gang and so on. Look at the comments when they post something on Facebook or not on Facebook, in X or something like that. I mean, everyone has figured out the scam by now. And because the whole political situation, not just in the US but also in Europe, is so corrupt, everyone always assumes the worst case scenario, that there's no gold in Fort Knox or that Germany has lost all its gold or something like that. So in Germany, it's not like that. Germany has actually brought its gold back. That was just a silly example. And David Sacks says we need to be careful. It could still be that the gold is in Fort Knox. But he also says he has no plan, we just have to check it. We need to check if the gold is there. And the Department of Government Efficiency is uncovering so many things with USAID and the IRS, and there's more to come. The Fed is supposed to be audited, and trust in the government keeps sinking. People always think there are bigger scandals and more fraud and corruption going on. And that's why he says he actually thinks the gold might even be there. But because trust keeps sinking, everyone just assumes the gold isn't there. So feel free to drop your tips down below. I still think that what's really in Fort Knox is mostly toilet paper, but hey, it's not a bad idea to have a strategic toilet paper reserve. And now we really need to take a close look at the first Digital Asset Subcommittee hearing that happened here in the US, because Cynthia Lummis has been hyping it up big time. A lot of people have said, hey, this is the biggest event in Q, there's going to be a major breakthrough here. Some people have even said, hey, it's being reported that there's a strategic Bitcoin reserve and so on. And now let's see how this all turned out. Here it says, for example, Bitcoin is going mainstream. Washington finally gets it. For years, Bitcoin was the absolute outsider in the financial world. Now it's getting a seat at the table. Senator Lummis just confirmed that bipartisan Bitcoin legislation is in the works, and both sides of the aisle are keeping a close eye on it. So the Republicans and Democrats are really keeping an eye on this. The US government is no longer ignoring Bitcoin. Clear regulations could bring Bitcoin further into the financial mainstream. If the politicians take it seriously, the rest of the world will follow. And we can see that there are now a few Bitcoin laws in the US that have been rejected. But there are also new ones that keep getting passed. So there was some law that came up again today. I think it made it to the Senate and all that. So really exciting things are happening here. But now we had the hearing here, and let's take a look and listen to what Cynthia Lummis had to say, because it's really interesting. By the way, Cynthia Lummis is the one who brought the proposal in the US to buy 1 million Bitcoin or even more to build up a stockpile.
What is a digital? Many members of the Senate were still trying to wrap their heads around what is a Bitcoin, what is a digital asset, what is a stablecoin, what is a Howey test. And so now we've arrived at the point where we can move forward. We're on the precipice of finally creating a bipartisan legislative framework for both stablecoins and market structure. I hope we can get both pieces of legislation to President Trump for his signature this year.
So she's saying that there are still knowledge gaps in the US right now. A lot of people don't know what the difference is between Bitcoin and stablecoins. Many people don't know what a Howey test is and a lot more. But she is confident that this year Donald Trump will sign a law for digital asset regulation, and that will also include Bitcoin. That's definitely the statement from Senator Cynthia Lummis. She is very, very confident. I'm not quite sure if this already includes a strategic Bitcoin reserve or something like that. But we also have to honestly say that this was just one side of it. Now we see the bullish statement from Cynthia Lummis, who clearly names Bitcoin here. But I have looked at the whole thing in its entirety and have also gathered several opinions here, and have also really listened to the analyses and reports. On the hearing here, when you look at the whole thing, you realize that this was the only part where Bitcoin was actually mentioned. There was one other spot, but other than that, I would have only talked about digital assets, about crypto, and especially that's the word that kept coming up, stablecoins. There was also a report about it. Stablecoins, not Bitcoin, were the focus at the first US Digital Assets Subcommittee hearing. So it wasn't really about Bitcoin at all. Everyone thought, okay, now some big Bitcoin news is coming out, some massive Bitcoin laws are going to be released. No, it's mainly about stablecoins, and it keeps coming up that the whole Bitcoin story is really just running in the background. The focus is actually on stablecoins themselves. Cynthia Lummis has talked a lot about stablecoins here. She talks about how stablecoins can further strengthen the US dollar, how the US dollar can be further exported to other countries, and how demand for US government bonds is increasing. And that's just the feeling I have at the moment, because often the Bitcoin laws don't mention Bitcoin directly, but rather they always say digital assets, and they want to somehow sell the politicians here, hey, we're going to make this a digital asset, and hey, we'll have stable coins, and then we can stabilize the dollar and so on. Let's then try to somehow incorporate Bitcoin so that we can sell Bitcoin to people not only as a stable coin, but also as a kind of digital asset. And so you can perhaps somehow make Bitcoin more attractive to people by not focusing on Bitcoin at all, but talking mainly about stable coins, how the bonds are becoming more in demand because Tether, the main issuer of the stablecoin, has to buy massive amounts of bonds. And on the side, you casually mention, oh, by the way, there's also Bitcoin, some decentralized thing and all that. And come on, let's include it in the law too, let's push it through so we not only create a stablecoin reserve, but also have a little Bitcoin reserve. And that's the vibe that's really in the air right now. And some people say, okay, it's really, really bad to do it this way because we should be focusing on Bitcoin, not stablecoins, because stablecoins are a potential devil's tool, since with stablecoins we can create private CBDCs. We recently had a discussion in the group where someone said, yeah, CBDCs are now banned in the U.S. But folks, that's completely irrelevant, because if you want to create CBDCs, you can easily do that through stablecoins. Then you just take the gun, hold it to Tether's head, and hey folks, you need to regulate stablecoins the way we want. You need to implement blacklists here, which already exist and everything. And then you can introduce CBDCs through private hands instead of public ones, like it's happening in Europe right now. Instead, you take a different approach, and people seem to even cheer for it at times. And that's the big danger you have with the whole situation. On the other hand, you could say that the chances of a Bitcoin bill passing are higher if it's framed as a digital asset. I'm not a legal expert or anything, so I can't say much about it. For sure, if you want to buy Bitcoin, I'm going to drop a link below to 21 Bitcoin, where you can easily, safely, and simply buy Bitcoin. Use the code BitcoinHotel and save up to 20% on the fees when buying Bitcoin. And now, if you want to secure your Bitcoin as much as possible, I'm going to drop a link below to a TREZOR hardware wallet, where you can easily and safely store your Bitcoin, protecting yourself from hackers, theft, and a lot more. With the code BitcoinHotel, you also get 10% off the purchase of a TREZOR hardware wallet. In my opinion, every self-sovereign Bitcoiner should have a hardware wallet because you don't want to rely on people, BlackRock, or anyone else. Otherwise, you're left out in the cold. So guys, drop a comment below and let me know what you think about the current situation. Until then, peace out.